Hey there, guys. The markets ended this week on a green note, and I'm going to go into some charts of the S&P 500. We're going to look at a hot big tech play that made a lot of people a lot of money this week. I was giving active plays in the Discord regarding Nvidia. I'm going to jump you guys into the Nvidia chart so that we can be prepared for what's going to happen next week. And we're going to be looking and asking the question, have I given a correct prediction that the S&P 500 is already begun a move back to all-time highs? Now, at the moment, that is my bias. I predicted that we would pull back just under 6%. We did. And then I predicted that we should continue back to the top of the trend, which should be a pretty powerful move. Well, we're going to go and we're going to see, are we on track for that? Has anything changed? We had a couple red days this week. Did that change my confidence level, or have the technicals been canceled or nullified in any way? Well, I'm going to take you guys into the charts. We're going to analyze that. We're also going to look at Bitcoin. We're going to look at a heat map of the S&P and crypto and kind of check in there as well. Thank you guys for joining me. This is the Stocks with Josh show. I appreciate all of the likes. It feeds the video out to more viewers. It feeds the algorithm. And if you need help trading these choppy markets, and let me just warn you from what I see looking into the charts in the days ahead, that things will become choppier. Because as I've said on this show many times, the market moves in cycles. There's a moment in which it is in a markup phase, right? And then it goes into a distribution phase, and then that's followed by a very hard decline phase. Then eventually it cools off, despair comes and goes, and then we move sideways in a tight price range until it builds enough momentum to go higher. We know that the S&P 500 has continued to be a great place to invest money over the long term because it has continued that pattern, that cycle I just gave you guys, constantly moving to the upside. I mentioned in a recent video when I was out in New York as a guest over at the NASDAQ, had a wonderful time touring that facility and meeting some folks who follow this page from New York. I mentioned that I saw, and some people shared their portfolios with me, that some of it wasn't good. I'm going to continue on the theme of getting set up in 2024. We're not even through the halfway mark of this year, and I want you guys to pause with me, and I want you to stop and think. If you do the exact same thing, if you're not winning right now, and you do the exact same thing all year long, how is that going to change? I want you to begin to ask yourself, what could I do to simplify my trade plan so that I can begin to have more consistent wins, more consistent investments? One, if you've got a long-term portfolio and you're just adding to it incrementally, it should, by its own, over time, could be a proven winner. But then some of you guys have YOLO'd your entire trade portfolio into single stocks or single cryptos. On that note, and I'm not going to do a lot of editing for this video, so I'm not going to show a lot, but on that note, I got a comment from the live that I just did with Tim, and someone said to me, Joshua, I bought Brett because you talked about it, and I put $100,000 into it. Now, if you don't know what Brett is, it's a meme stock. It's available on the Coinbase wallet over on Coinbase, right? And somebody YOLO'd, put in, I don't know if that's all their money, but that's a ton of money. Now, first off, there's a couple rules that have been violated. One, it's pulled back, and there's like, Josh, man, I bought this because of you. Well, I want to remind you guys, you got to use a stop loss, right? I'm constantly advocating a stop loss, and I myself use a stop loss. I either do one of two things. I use a stop loss, or I control my position size. So if it drops, I can add to it at a lower price. So you did not control your position size because 100,000K, unless you're a billionaire, is way too much money to have invested in a single meme coin. Now, I'm not here to give you a hard time, but I want you guys to make money. It's okay to have a trade account, but you've got to have a good trading strategy, and that's what I'm trying to teach you on this show. I show the candles. I show the candle patterns. I talk with you guys about momentum and price action. We're going to do it again today. So let's just kick things off. I'm going to go first into the heat map of the S&P 500. We're going to check in on how stocks were performing today. Okay, big tech. All of it's in green for the most part. Tesla's in gray. Eli Lilly having a bad day, but that's actually somewhat normal. It doesn't always run with the rest of big tech. Let's just take a quick view at what was going on as far as the market was concerned. Wall Street ends higher with the Fed and earnings in focus. So the breakdown of this particular article is that the Fed basically was not suggesting that he was going to give another rate hike, but instead he was talking about a rate cut coming down the road. And as I've said many, many times, that if he doesn't give a rate cut, he's still concerned that the market's too hot, which means that things can continue to climb because it's strength. He's trying to slow down the economy, folks. Let's jump into the S&P 500. Okay, guys, I'm going to keep it very simple. You guys know that I predicted that we would have this 6% pullback, and then I said that it would be followed by 5 strong weeks pushing us back to the top of the range, ultimately causing us to get back up to 5,300 and then eventually to 5,500. And then at that point, I think we're going to have another period of consolidation. So let's just see whether or not we're on track for this to continue to play out. Let's just review it. Here we've got this green candle at around 52, right under 5,300. And I said that we were due for a pullback. Then we got 1, 2, 3 strong candles to the downside. And then since then, it was responded with a strong green candle that pushed us up off the bottoms, making that price point of around a 6% pullback to be a selling rejection. So buyers came in. But now we've got a red candle this week. Let's go over to the past, which I've kind of modeled and suggested that we are in a particular time zone similar to 2021. Some of the characteristics are very, very similar. And I have pointed out this particular 6% correction. It was actually around 5.6%. And let me zoom in so you guys can see this, right? So when we hit the high at that time, which was right around 4,500, it was followed with 4 very strong weeks down. 1, 2, this was a green candle, but it still went lower, and then 4. Now the 5th weekly candle actually did not reach the high that the weekly candle before it had reached. It actually went a little bit lower. So there was 5 weeks down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if we count that 5th candle as the reversal candle, then there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candles, each of these representing a week. So basically 1 month and 1 week till we got to the top of the move. This is where I'm suggesting that we're going to end up right around 5,500 where we're currently at, and we're going to see some additional distribution in the S&P 500. So let's go back to the current time and compare it. Guys, if you like these charts and it's teaching you something and it helps to get this recap, let me know in the comments section if this is helpful. So here we had our moment in which I had predicted a bearish turn and a correction back under 6%. We got that 5.6%. So 1, 2, 3. The 4th week down actually isn't a lower candle. It's actually got a higher low. Now this would be essentially the moment in time in which we might begin to go back up. The 5th week candle in the other chart actually had a lower low. But in this case, even though we've got a red candle this week, we've actually made a higher low. And so at this moment in time, I would suggest to you that the idea that we are going to push all the way back up to 5,500, I would say that at the end of this week, that idea has remained entirely intact. Now, I'm going to be going into the Nvidia chart here in just a minute, but I just want to kind of recap what I just told you. Now, if this is true, if we are already in the reclaiming of ground on the S&P 500, on this essentially this 5th week, which is a decision week, it's already better than the performance that we saw back in 2021 when they had that 6% correction. So our present 6% correction is actually leaning more bullish. And so I'm going to say it again. Why should I give up on the view that this is simply a 6% correction on an extremely strong move of the S&P 500? And so I'm going to continue to watch going into the next 4 weeks a continuation of green candles. And as I've mentioned before, you say, oh, Josh, you're telling us we're absolutely going back to 5,500. No, I'm telling you that we're moving up. I'm telling you that next week, I'm going to expect to see another green candle. It should be even more decisive. Next week should end Friday on a weekly candle, and that would continue to prove this idea. Now, we're going to run into our very first test between 5,200 and 5,260. That's where we're going to run into our first test, because if we don't make it back to our previous high and we get a rejection candle and a strong red candle pushing us down, making a new weekly low, then I'll come out and tell you guys that we've got to take caution and we can't expect for there to be a continuous move higher. So at the moment, this narrative, this bias has been paying me. And specifically the play that I made today with that bullish bias in mind was Nvidia. I gave notifications yesterday in the Patreon, which is the Stock Squad Discord. If you don't know what that is, there's going to be a link in the description of the video and the top pinned comment. That's where myself, StockMo, Keenan Grace, and Stock Up with Larry Jones share trade plays and analysis on the daily, as well as a community in which we answer questions. You can get more content from me and the guys over there. And if you were following along with the Nvidia play, it should have been very profitable. Please let me know in the comment section what kind of wins you had. So today I lined things up and I told everybody, here's our setup, here's our resistance, here's our support. If we get an hourly close above or beneath these levels, it's got to open above and close above. It's got to open below and close below. That would be the confirmation that we're either going higher or lower. In this case, we went higher and we had a nice move up. It's also something I've said on this channel. So if you're not even in the Stock Squad, you actually had the information that you needed in the video I did last, where I said you want to be going long with Nvidia above $850. That's one of the lines in the sand. So if you're above it, you kind of want to potentially be going long on Nvidia. I actually have said in my previous video, as well as I'm saying today, that I'm bullish on Nvidia because I believe that that pullback that we recently saw, which is also a pullback that I strongly predicted on the exact day when we had a green candle pointing upwards, I said, ignore it, we're going to get a pullback. And boy, did we get one. Since then, I've said that was enough. That was enough of a pullback. It's potentially time to go back up and test 881. Now, let me warn you, because going into Monday, I think we're going to get choppy again. I think we're actually going to potentially have another smackdown on big tech. That'll give us the low of the week. And then as we go through the week and begin to get more earnings, kind of what that initial article was talking about, it was the Fed and earnings that caused this week to end higher. The market's still looking for data. The data it got from the Fed, it took as bullish. Now we need more earnings data and see if we get a confirmation of that bullishness. And if earnings next week is good, then we're going to see that we can end the week on a high note. And it could mean that by the end of the week, we could easily see 881 on Nvidia. And I'm going to be in that. I'm going to be giving updates on that in the Discord. If you want those updates, you're going to get a little bit of it here. You're going to get a little bit more of it over in the Discord. Go check that out. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on with Bitcoin and crypto right now. Okay, we're in a nice green spot right now on crypto across the board. Things are pretty much green, not much red. It looks like Near Protocol is over here in the red, facing a struggle, but I am bullish on Near. The question that we've got to ask ourselves is this pain in crypto over? Are we also going to move higher with the altcoins and with Bitcoin? And I am going to lean towards believing that Bitcoin and the altcoins are going to run up with the market right now. That doesn't mean that it's time for them to break out. It just simply means that we might have come down enough to get us a candle over the course of next week that simply goes higher. At the moment, I'm anticipating Bitcoin to run somewhat sideways for the next 2 to 3 weeks and possibly even test the top of the range. I drew this support line for you guys in a previous video. I drew it when the price of Bitcoin was not down here, but was actually up here. And I told you guys we were going to come back and hit that. Let me just zoom in on this so you guys can appreciate that, right? I predicted that right here that we would come back over the course of the next 2 weeks and we would hit this support line. Now, this at the moment could hold. So we may see Monday or Sunday, we might see another touch of this support line, but after that, I'm expecting some sort of movement back up. The other thing I want you guys to be looking at is this stochastic RSI. I'm looking at the weekly time frame. Now, this is an area, I talked about it in the last video, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. We came back enough in the price that we see a little bend here in the stochastic RSI. The very next thing that we're going to be looking for is for this blue line to cross back up into this RSI zone and over the other trend line, and that should be signaling that Bitcoin may have bottomed. Now that can actually continue down, or it can actually move in this way while the price actually moves higher. If you follow the chart, you know that that could happen. And so similarly, even though I think that Sunday or Monday could actually be a little bit turbulent for Bitcoin, largely I think that it's gearing up to begin to go back and test the top of the range. So what exactly I see in Bitcoin and how we might see that play out in the altcoins is that we are largely going to have a little bit of turbulent action, perhaps over the weekend and Monday, which is going to then lead into some bullish buying. And through the course of the next week, we're going to begin to move higher. And what I'm expecting there is potentially a series of higher lows. Now, that trend line is what we need to watch. So that trend line is important. If we actually get a candle that pushes through it and then opens and closes beneath it on a smaller time frame, I will come out here and warn you guys, because it will be signaling a much bigger move down. But similar to the S&P 500, my default bias right now on Bitcoin is that the low that we just saw may be very, very close to the low, or may have been the low, and we might begin to move sideways and make a series of higher lows as we move through the next couple weeks, which could eventually lead into the momentum that's going to push us higher. We've got some things to watch. We're going to watch the stochastic RSI. We've got to watch the fib levels, because if we do get a break next week and this doesn't continue higher, then we're going to have to come back to 49K on Bitcoin. It's going to change a lot of the way that we're going to be trading the alts over the next couple weeks. And so at the moment, my bias on Bitcoin is that by the end of next week, I'm going to be looking for some strong green candles. Guys, that's it for today. I hope this helped you. I will try to answer some questions in the comment section. Hit that like and hit the subscribe so you can stay connected and get some of these technical analysis on big tech and crypto and make some money. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I hope you made some money this week. Peace and blessings. Take care.